Hello, welcome back. Let's read about this and stop for today. That's a toy brand, Mamod. They're making small toy steam engines like Wilesco. But this Wilesco PDF is only like 3 pages. I don't know why. But this is a long PDF, but let's just read it and stop for today. I will continue tomorrow with my Nvidia graphic cards.
Mamod. Mullins Engineers, 1940 Mamod Mark.jpg. Type Private Industry Toys founded 1937. Founder Geoffrey Mullins. Headquarters Smethwick, Whalley, since 1992. UK area served worldwide. A products toy steam engines. Website mamod.co.uk. Mamod is a British toy manufacturer that specialises in manufacturing live steam models. The company was founded in Birmingham by Geoffrey Mullins in 1937. The name is a portmanteau of Mullins models. The first models produced were off-stationary steam engines, originally sold under the Hobbies brand name. Mullins soon switched to selling them under the name Mamod. The company later began creating models of road rollers, traction engines, steam wagons, and other steam road vehicles. These models were aimed at the toy market, so they were simple to operate and ran at low boiler pressures for safety, but were not accurate scale models. Most Mamod models use oscillating cylinders, usually single acting. Some of these engines have regulators in either the steam feed or exhaust, but many others run unregulated, in the simpler models, or have a simple reversing mechanism to alter the Q-taff, thus controlling the power forward/speed and direction of the engine. Early models had single or multi-wick lamps or vaporizing spirit burners, but in the mid-1970s the company changed to hexamin solid fuel, which came in tablet form and provided low heat in a relatively safe form. SC, SE and minor series stationary engines, 1937-79. A Mamod SE4 flatbed twin from 1937. Shown in the Hobbies colors of darker green and red. A Mamod SE2 engine from C 1958 showing transitional form, new 1958 white firebox complete with 3-wick burner. The SE range has its origins in 1936 when Geoffrey Mullins started to make engines for Hobbies of Durham. His engines were loosely based on the Bowman engines that Geoffrey Bowman Jenkins had made for Hobbies until 1935. The main difference between the Bowman and Mullins was that the latter were smaller, only on metal bases. 1. Handle, except the SE1, had the chimney attached to the top of the boiler, known as a locomotive-style chimney. From 1937, Mullins decided to make his own range of engines as well as those he was producing for Hobbies. With the exception of a few small detail changes such as lighter shade of 2 Mamod SE3 twin-cylinder steam engines from 1969. The engine on the left is the Griffin and Jorge version, and the version on the right displays push-button whistle and screw-on crank whips. A 1949 Mamod SE2 engine showing new pressed steel engine frame and superheated boiler. Mamod minor engines from 1949 and 1954. The red disc crank version is earlier engine, whilst the 54 version clearly shows the red unclipped Mazak flywheel. Paints and a Mamod badge, they were almost identical to the Hobbies range. The difference between Mamod and Hobbies became somewhat blurred. A Mamod badged SE4 could be found in the Hobbies colors. This was the very beginnings of a philosophy which meant that the engines had to be sold and out the door. Unsold engines meant lost profit, and so nothing was wasted. Any differences between the two ranges had all but disappeared by 1940. With the onset of the Second World War, Mullins's association with Hobbies firm in Durham came to an end. and the SC series OOF engines were the last steam toys to be sold under the Hobbies mark. Mullins had also realized he could make much more money by concentrating on his own engines. With hostilities increasing, the St. Mary Row factory was put into mothballs and war interests took over. Although Geoffrey Mullins did continue to make limited numbers of engines throughout the war, after the war the business was revived, and by 1946, a limited range of steam toys was being made: the SE1, SE2, Minor 1 and tools. The pre-war SE3 and SE4 were dropped along with their short-lived twin-cylinder Minor 2. Apart from the Minor 1, now usually called Millimeter 1, the engines made in immediate post-war period had base-mounted chimneys. The boiler-mounted chimney soon returned though, during 1946. In all other respects the engines were the same as before the war. The SE1 and SE2 were produced only in this form for a few months. Post-war rationing meant that it was harder to replace materials used in production, and so the SE1 and SE2 changed back to locomotive-style chimney. Apart from color changes, the Millimeter 1 continued almost unchanged. Until 1948, the tools still used flat bases and cast iron bodies. By 1948 the SE range had received its first real update. Mamod branded brass engine frames and hot stamped brass fly wheels were introduced, and the SE1 and SE2 each received a regulator as well. Also introduced was the new Minor 2, Millimeter 2. This had a single-cylinder engine unit and was a larger version of Millimeter 1. All engines continued to use wick burners with either 1, 2 or 3 wick tubes. By 1949, with the move to Camden Street, the firm had acquired a pressing facility and the expensive brass engine frames were replaced with pressed steel ones. The design was similar to those found on some Marklin engines. The boilers on the SE1 and SE2 now had superheating. The SE2 retained its regulator but the SE1 lost its. The MM1 engine became the first engine in the range to have a raised pressed base. The range remained in this form until 1953 when, with the introduction of cheaper Mazak as a material, the brass fly wheels were gradually replaced. This is typical of the Mullins engineers' approach in ensuring that the models were always updated and changed to keep the price as competitive as possible. In that immediate post-war period, there were many other manufacturers making steam toys, such as Plain Products, Silden, Sale Luton Bowman and Bernac. At the start of 1954, the SE range all received raised bases as well as cosmetic updates and changes. By 1958 all but the Millimeter 1 had received the new vaporizing spirit burners, which had first appeared in 1957 with introduction of the all-new twin-cylinder SE3. Again there was another round of cosmetic changes with updated boiler bands and fireboxes. Combinations of these old and new parts can be found in the transitional engines of the late 1950s period, for example the SE1, 2 and Millimeter 2. By the mid-1960s the engines were using pop rivets for the engine frame securing method, along with the entire Mamod range, as well more cosmetic changes. In 1967, the SE range received its next major update with the introduction of these 1 and SE2 replacing the SE1 and 2. The superheating was gone and the simplified pipework was all new. The SE2 also got a reversing lever like the MEC1 Meccano engine of 1965. Other details such as paint color, boiler end cap and whistle design as well as decal layout were gradually changed. One point worth mentioning is the fact that from 1967 until about 1972, the SE1, 2 and 3 could be found with different green paint on their engine frames. This paint was similar to a hammered effect type finish and was most likely purchased as a job lot by the managing director at the time, Eric Mullins. Steve Malinchas confirmed that this was the case and his father would try anything new or changes which made production cheaper. The minor range never received this paint finish. The SE3 was unchanged bar the introduction of the Griffin and George Educational Suppliers version in 1969. This engine was the only variation to Mamod's biggest post-war stationary engine. It featured the very first silver soldered boiler, at the insistence of G&G, and also had a steam pipe union nut at the boiler instead of the usual stopcock. It carried an extra foil G&G lozenge logo by the engine as well. About 2,000 were made until about mid-1970s. It was sold only to schools and came complete with a comprehensive manual for using the engine in laboratory experiments. Later examples of this engine were standard SE3s but carrying a revised G&G logo for different design. This Griffin badge could sometimes be found placed alongside the warning label applied to all stationary engines in 1976 explaining the use of inappropriate fuel containers and refueling techniques. The 1970s were the heyday of Mullins engineers. The Millimeter 1 received a vaporizing burner in 1970. Both miners got overflow plugs in 1975. The engines were converted to solid fuel in 1977 for the domestic market. It had happened earlier for export, and, in 1978, the entire range, except for the Millimeter 1, received sight glasses on the boiler instead of the overflow plug. By the late 1970s the range was looking tired and so, with considerable investment from the Mullins family, in 1979 the SE range was superseded by the SP range. In general, the SP models are modernized versions of the earlier SE models, the changes being for safety as well as cosmetic reasons. There is no strict correspondence between models in the SE and SP ranges. A real comparison between the ranges can be seen in the following table. Pre-war post-war current comment minor 1 1939 40 minor 1 1946 79 SP 1 1979 85 minor 2 1939 402 CYL minor 2 1948 79 SP 2 1979 to date 1 CYL SE 1 1936 37 SE 1 1946 67 SE 1 1967 79 Meccano 1965 76 SP3 1979 85 SE2 1936 37 SC2 1939 40 SE2 1946 67 SE2 1967 79 SP4 1979 to date. Inc. SP4D, SE3 1936 37 SC3 1939 401 CYL SE4 1936 37 SC4 1939 40 SE3 1957 79, Inc. G and GVERSION. SP5 MK179 to 85 MK22001 to date 2 CYL SP6 slide valve SP7 twin cylinder slide valve SP8 beam engine ME1 1936 40, Hobbies and Mamod, Me1 1958 85, Mamod only, Me2 1958 65 Me3 1965. 72. Meccano engine. A Mullins designed and built MEC1 dating from about 1970. Between 1965 and 1976, Mullins produced a steam engine to their requirements of the Meccano company, which was the label it was sold under. It had a special base designed to facilitate building the engine into Meccano models. It incorporated a mechanism which shifted the cylinder in relation to the inlet and exhaust, allowing it to run in reverse. 2. After the Meccano branded version was discontinued, the same engine, with minor modifications, was later sold under the Mamod brand as the SP3. The original Meccano branded version never had an official name or model number, but it is now commonly called HEM EC1. The SP range 1979 to date. SP1. The SP1 was based on the Mamod Minor 1, which it replaced and which had been in production since 1939. It had the same boiler, similar engine unit and flywheel to the non-crank disc types. The main differences were that it had a new black die-cast chimney and a narrow solid fuel burner designed to take 1 liter blood broken in half. This was also the only SP engine to feature a water plug, as the boiler was too small to fit the standard Mamod water sight glass. The firebox remained the same as the older Minor 1. Some were a Mamod SP1 stationary engine, a circa 1979 built with the old Mamod Minor 1 boiler. The exhaust was a simply open port as on the Minor 2 and MEC1 engines. These engines with limited power and torque could drive at least 1 or 2 miniature tools. The SP1 was discontinued in 1985 after 27,500 had been produced. Introduced replacing discontinued number produced 1979 mm 1198,527, 500. SP2 and SP2D. A Mamod SP2 stationary engine. The SP2 was an all-new design introduced in 1979. It replaced the Mamod Minor 2 and was similar to it in a few ways. It had the same type of boiler as the Minor 2 as well as the engine unit and frame. The exhaust was a simple open port like the Minor 2. The SP2D is a version of the SP2 with an integral dynamo. The SP2 does a larger diameter flywheel which drives the dynamo mounted inside the base of the chimney by a belt. A small LED bulb is fitted to the top of the chimney. These were powerful engines for the size and could drive a full workshop of 4 tools quite easily. The SP2 models are still in production. 36,878 had been produced by 1995. Introduced replacing discontinued number produced 1979 mm 2-36,878 to 1995, still in production. Minor variations in the type. Early engine frames were painted blue. Later into the 80s this was changed to black. Some sight glasses were secured by screws as opposed to pop rivets. Sight glass cover could be a silver, metal or brass. SP3. The SP3 was based on the MEC1 Meccano engine, which first appeared in 1965. It was basically the same except for a solid fuel burner, sight glass, a whistle instead of the steam dome and plastic gears, instead of metal ones, on the crankshaft for driving Meccano models. The exhaust was a simple open port in the engine frame as per the MEC1, and the engine carried 2 makers' marks, a Mamod and a Meccano type scalloped edge decal. The base plate was silver painted and the boiler was a standard Mamod drawn type tube as used on the SP2, SP4 and SR1A. The SP3 could drive the whole series of workshop tools. A Mamod SP3 from about 1980 showing extra gears on a counter shaft and additional Meccano outriggers. Introduced replacing discontinued number produced 1979 MEC 119859,067. Minor variations in the type. Reverser handles were red or black. The crank web usually painted black, some examples bare metal. Some sight glasses were secured by screws instead of pop rivets. Some sight glass covers were silver metal instead of brass. SP4 and SP4D. A Mamod SP4 stationary engine. The SP4 was the mid-range engine in the SP series. It featured the standard Mamod drawn boiler and die-cast chimney. The engine frame for this model was mounted on a silver plinth, and the unit had a reverser which allowed the engine to run in either a reverse or forward direction. It could drive a good selection of tools simultaneously, using a line shaft, and it also featured exhaust to chimney. The boiler was heated using the 2-tablet burner tray as on the SP2 and 3, and a whistle was also included on it. The SP Forge variant had a unidirectional engine